Hi, in this video, I'm going to teach you how to sound just like a native speaker of American English and speak with a perfect American accent. And I'll even share with you a secret about how native speakers actually use the flap T. Shh. Last month, I published a video about wanting to work with you on YouTube. I gave you an assignment. Record yourself saying the following sentences in your best American accent. We need to leave now or else we're going to be late. Tell him to get a move on. I asked you to send me your video so I could use it in this video, where I'm going to analyze your speech and give you feedback on what I hear. I want to first thank all of the viewers who participated in this assignment and sent me their videos. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It was so much fun for me to watch your videos and listen to your amazing English pronunciation. Seriously, you guys are so impressive. It blows my mind that you are so good at English, which may be your second, third, or fourth language, and that you took the time to actually complete the assignment and send it to me. That's just beyond cool, so thank you to everyone who participated. This is my first time doing this type of video, but I really wanted to try it out because I think it's super helpful when students get to watch other students receive coaching on their pronunciation. I can sit here and make videos of me talking about reductions and linking, and that's great and helpful. But the real magic happens when you are the ones who do the talking, and I get to listen and coach you on your American English pronunciation. So this video will be helpful to everyone who is watching, both the people whose videos I used in this project and the people whose videos I sadly couldn't use due to time constraints. So everyone will benefit from watching this type of feedback video, and I hope you'll watch and practice along with us. Some of you asked why I selected those particular sentences for this assignment. Those sentences are something I would say and have said in my actual conversations. Maybe before leaving for an event that starts at a specific time, like going to a movie or meeting up for dinner reservations with friends. So they are good examples of natural conversational English that native speakers actually use. And they are also good examples of when native speakers might use reductions, contractions, rhythm, linking, and intonation in conversational English. They basically give you the opportunity to practice all areas of the American accent. So today, we'll listen to sections of the videos that viewers sent to me, and I'll analyze their speech for specific features of the American accent, like reductions, contractions, linking, etc. I'll give feedback about what I hear, and I'll provide coaching on how to pronounce these sentences with an American accent. And I first want to say that everyone who sent me a video did so well with this assignment. I heard many, many good American accent pronunciations in these videos. And I'll try to point out when I heard good examples of the American accent. I'll also highlight some of the areas where the speaker could improve his or her American accent. I won't be able to comment on every area of improvement in the videos due to time limitations. If I did, this video would easily be over an hour long. But I'll discuss a few of the most important areas that I heard in each person's speech. So let's jump right in. We'll start with the first part of the recording, we need to leave now. Here's how I said it in the video. We need to leave now, and here are examples of how you pronounced it.
We need to leave now.
We need to leave now.
We need to leave now. We need to leave now.
Very nice job. So here's what I'm listening for. First, the long tense E vowel that's in the words we, need, and leave. The vowel in each of these words is the same vowel E. But the tricky part is, sometimes non-native speakers pronounce this vowel like the short I as in bit vowel, especially the word leave. It's common for non-native speakers to pronounce leave closer to live. Or they might devoice that final consonant and say something like leaf. Here's where I heard a shorter vowel. Maybe not quite the I as in bit vowel, but these students used a vowel that was closer to the short I vowel.
We need to live now. We need to live now.
We need to live now. We need to live now.
We need to live now. We need to live now.
But interestingly, they all had good E vowels in we and need. So if you've got a good E sound in need, remember it's the same E sound in the word leave. And I recommend focusing on this word leave. Because if you say the short vowel, live, that's a real word in English, and it can be confusing for your listener. And if you devoice that final V consonant and instead pronounce it like an F consonant,
We need to live now.
that could sound like leaf, which is another real word in English, and that can also be confusing for your listener. The second thing I was listening for was the reduction of the word to. The word to is a function word, and it is very commonly reduced to t. The u vowel reduces to the schwa So it's not to with a full u sound, it's t with a short schwa vowel.
We need to leave now.
We need to leave now.
We need to live now.
Nice job, you guys. But I think these students used the full oo vowel.
We need to live now. We need to live now.
We need to live now. We need to live now.
So try to use the reduced vowel here, ta. This will help you to sound much more natural, and it will help the rhythm of your speech to match a more natural, native-like rhythm. And lastly, I was listening for intonation. The typical intonation pattern that most native speakers would use is to place stress and a higher pitch on the words need and now. We need to leave now.
We need to leave now.
We need to leave now.
We need to live now.
We need to leave now.
Great, just like that. But I heard a different intonation pattern from this speaker.
We need to live now. We need to live now.
So instead of lifting the intonation all the way through the sentence, only the words need and now should have higher intonation. The other words should be lower in intonation. Now let's discuss the next part, or else we're going to be late. Here's how I said it in the video, or else we're going to be late. And here are the things I was listening for when I completed my analysis. First, I was listening for any reductions that could occur, such as reducing the word or to the word we're to were, and the phrase going to gonna. And linking goes hand in hand with the reduction of the word or, because the phrase or else is most naturally pronounced as or else, almost like it's one word.
Or else we're gonna be late.
Or else we're gonna be late.
Or else we're gonna be late.
Now, these speakers didn't fully reduce or to and I also used like a semi-reduction of or, somewhere between or and So these speakers could have reduced or to squeeze just a little bit more out of their American accent. But they had good linking, or else, and that helped this phrase to sound natural, even without that reduction.
Or else. Or else.
Or else. Or else.
Or else.
I heard other students use what's called a tapped R, which means the tongue tip touches the roof of the mouth when pronouncing the R sound.
Or else we're gonna be late. Or else we're gonna be late.
Or else we're going to be late. Or else we're going to be late.
This tapped R is not part of the American accent. Instead, the American R sound can be held out, without any interruption. The tapped R, on the other hand, is interrupted because the tongue tip makes contact with the roof of the mouth. Or else, else, else. Let's also look at the reductions of we're to were and going to gonna.
We're gonna be late.
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 Nice job. I heard good reductions there and an overall nice flow to your speech. These speakers pronounced the full pronunciation of one or both of these words.
Or else we're going to be late.
Or else we're going to be late.
It's very common to use reductions here because the word we're is a function word and it's also a contraction. So by definition, it's not usually stressed in spoken English. Native speakers are going to reduce it to were, almost every time they say it. The same goes for the phrase going to. This one is very commonly contracted to just gonna. This also happens to phrases like want to, which contracts down to wanna, and sort of, which contracts down to sorta. So to sound more natural, I recommend learning those reductions and using them in your speech. Now let's listen to the final sentence. Tell him to get a move on. Here's how I said it in the video. Tell him to get a move on. And here's how you said it.
Tell him to get a move on.
Tell him to get a move on.
Nice job, you guys. I heard good examples of the American accent here in all of the areas I was listening for. The other students had elements of great American accents as well, so let's take a closer look at those recordings. I was listening for many things in this sentence. First, the reduction of the word him to either im or This is called a pronoun reduction, and it's very common in spoken English. Pronouns that begin with H, like he, him, her, and his, and TH, like them, are commonly reduced. The initial H or TH consonant can be dropped from the pronunciation, and this happens a lot in spoken English. So I was listening for that particular reduction, and then the link between tell and im or Tell him, or tell him.
Tell him to get a move on.
Tell him to get a move on. Tell him.
Nice job, you guys. You got it. These students pronounced the H in him.
Tell him to get a move on.
Tell him to get a move on.
Tell him to get a move on.
And while it's okay to do that, you can pronounce the H in him and say, tell him. It's just probably more natural in spoken English to drop that H. And this helps the link between tell and him to happen much more smoothly. Tell him versus tell him. There were two more reductions I was listening for. The reduction of the word to ta, and the reduction of the word a to a. Notice both of these reductions include the schwa vowel. Every student used the reduced pronunciation of a. They pronounced it as a.
Tell him to get a move on.
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 Nice job. And these students got the other reduction, to ta.
Tell him to get a move on. Tell him to get.
Tell him to get a move on. Tell him to get.
Tell him to get a move on. Tell him to get a.
Tell him to get a move on. Tell him to get a.
Tell him to get a move on. Tell him to get a move on.
Nice job. These students used the full vowel pronunciation in the word to. Listen carefully.
Tell him to get a move on. Tell him to get.
Tell him to get a move on. Tell him to get.
To make your speech sound more natural and have native-like rhythm, I recommend using the reduction of to ta, because this reduction is so common in spoken English. The next thing I was listening for was the link between get and a. The T in get is between vowels and it's unstressed. So this T should have been pronounced like a flap, which is like a fast D sound in English. And that sounds like this. Getta, getta, getta.
Get a move on.
To get a move on.
Tell him to get a move on.
To get a move on.
To get a move on.
Tell him to get a move on.
Great job, you guys. Here's what it sounds like if you use a true T instead.
Tell him to get a move on. To get a move.
And while I understand that pronunciation, it's much more natural to change it to a flap, because this helps the linking to happen more smoothly. Getta instead of get-a. You'll hear the flap everywhere in American English, even in phrases that don't really follow the rules of the flap. I actually used a flap in my video in a phrase that no one else did. And this phrase violated the rules of the flap, but native speakers do it anyway. I'll share that with you in just a few moments. The last thing I was listening for was intonation. This phrase ends with an idiom, to get a move on. This might have been new for some of you, so it means to hurry, to move, to start moving, to start getting ready to leave, and do it fast. To get your move on, to start your move. The typical intonation pattern that most native speakers would use is this. Tell him to get a move on. So the words with the highest intonation are tell and move.
Tell him to get a move on.
Tell him to get a move on.
Nice job, you guys. Let me play a few other recordings and listen to the intonation that was used. Which word or words do you hear as having the highest pitch?
Tell him to get a move on.
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 For most of these students, I heard the highest intonation on the word on. Tell him to get a move on, move on, move on. But the intonation should actually be the opposite. Move on, not move on. And those two words, move on, should be linked up seamlessly. Move on, not move on.
Tell him to get a move on.
Tell him to get a move on.
And as promised, here's the secret place where I used a flap, but none of these students did. This is something that native speakers do all the time, and it violates the rules of the flap, but native speakers do it anyway. And I think it's because it simplifies the linking. It helps the phrase to sound more smooth. So the flap turns up in places where you wouldn't expect it. Listen to my pronunciation of the word to in this sentence. Tell him to get a move on. I said, tell him to get a. Tell him to get a move on. Tell him to get a move on. Tell him to get a move on. So I changed the T in to a flap. Usually, T's will turn into flaps when they are unstressed and between vowels. But this T in to is between a consonant, the M in him, and a vowel, the in ta. So this violates the rule. But I did it anyway. I can tell you why I did it, but I don't have a great answer for when I do it. So I used a flap here because it was easier to use a flap than to use a true T. The word to is so small and so reduced that I naturally wanted to sort of reduce that T as well. I also used another flap right after that in geta, and it's possible my brain was anticipating I was about to use another flap. So it started putting flaps in other places to make it easier to say. The T in to is often pronounced like a flap when to comes after a vowel, like go to bed. So it's common to pronounce to like da in English. And I'm sure my brain just over-applied that rule here. But it works because other native speakers do this too. So if your pronunciation is pretty good and you want to squeeze out just a little bit more of your American accent and sound even more native-like, listen to native speakers and try to identify areas where you think they used a flap or where they changed the T sound somehow. And research it, make sure they actually did use a flap, and try to imitate it. Again, thank you so much to the students who sent me their videos and allowed me to analyze them and give feedback. I couldn't have made this video without you. And just a quick note, if you liked this video, please click the like button and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any of my free English lessons. Be sure to check out the description below for information about how we can work together through YouTube memberships that I'm now offering and online training and live classes at English Pro. All of the links are in the description below. I hope this video was helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.